Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. How we doing?
Doing well. How are you today?
Doing good. Doing good.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it is great to be here. It's the first time we've done two Experience Friday Lives back to back. We did one last week, which we missed you, but you were visiting your daughter. Well worth it.
It was.
But missed you last week, and really excited for our topic today. I think it's going to be a really amazing conversation. But before we jump into there, hey, Michael, tell people why we even do this show and what the purpose of this is.
Yeah, and I think it's good to go on the negative side today of if you say experiences don't matter, you're basically saying that people don't matter. And I don't know that there's any person in leadership that would be brave enough to say that out loud. I mean, there's plenty of leaders who don't like people, but I don't know that anyone would actually say that out loud, that people don't matter. And yet they don't make investments that create experiences that make it better for people. So, and I think we'll get in that today with Geoffrey for sure. Of you can't separate experiences from people, and if you're not willing to say that people don't matter, then you need to get your butt out there and start working on experience.
I love it. And I love the way that comes in because this is a really hot topic. And we had a lot of people respond and see a lot of people listening in today already. So I think that's great. Well, let me jump in and let me just give a couple announcements, and then we'll bring Geoffrey up with us. We're really excited. In 2 weeks, we are launching season 7 of the Combustion Chronicles, and we doubled down on experience. Not only experience, but we have chief experience officers, chief customer officers, some from really fantastic companies globally. Here's a little bit about it. If you know any of these people, it's amazing. Really excited. But that will launch 2 weeks. Will be our first episode. So be looking for those downloads as well. Well, Geoffrey Roche is an accomplished healthcare and higher education executive with steadfast commitment and passion for healthcare innovation, future-focused strategy, transformation, cultural change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and workforce impact. His professional career includes over 15 years in hospital administration and higher education leadership as a strategic advisor to the president and CEO and department director of various departments, including business development and strategic planning, government affairs, community health, and public relations. So let's welcome Geoffrey to the stage with us. Hey, buddy. Oh, I think you're on mute, Geoffrey.
There you go. Look at that. That's a great way to start.
It happens, brother. It happens. So it is so good to have you here on the show. And I know this is a really hot topic of what's happening because we titled today, What in the World is Happening to the Healthcare Workforce? And we're going to dive in, and I think we're just going to scratch the surface on this today. But before we jump into that, just to give us a quick 60 to 90 seconds about you, why do what you do, and what keeps you motivated as you're doing it?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the opportunity to be with both of you. It's truly an honor. And let me just say that, why I do what I do in many ways, my mother's a nurse. And so as a young child, I had, the upbringing of knowing, my mother's story in many ways of what she was doing clinically as a nurse. But I would walk, in the community, get to know people, and they'd say, "Oh, your mother delivered, my family member," and all those types of experiences. And so why I do what I do in many ways was that influence. But then when I entered healthcare, what I saw is that we have a lot of work to do, particularly around culture, particularly around DEI, and particularly around just treating people as humans. And so I have been on that quest and will continue to be on that quest until I see that we do it right.
I love it. And I didn't know, I mean, you and I have known each other a while. I did not know your mother was a nurse. So now it even makes more sense to me of what this passion is. And so when we started talking pre-show on this, Geoffrey, We found this statistic, and we were just talking even before going live today, that typically people don't put this type of number out. And this is a recent report, and I always butcher, but from Elsevier Health, Clinician of the Future report. You can actually go out and download it. I'll find the link and put it into the comments. But they put a number that usually does not go out in public, as you know. And it's simply this, that 47% of U.S. healthcare workers plan to leave their positions in the next 2 to 3 years. And when you sent that over to me and I started to read the report, it kind of put chills in me. Even knowing what I'm going through in my personal journey right now as a patient and with cancer, like in 2 to 3 years, almost half. And so let's go there. Michael, you want to start digging into these questions with Geoffrey and see what in the world is going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, do you have like an overview, like big picture response message that you're getting out into the world, or is it just so nuanced that there's really not a big picture response?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Michael, let me first say that the answer is not it's because of COVID. So that's what you normally will hear healthcare leaders and others subscribe to. This has actually been an issue that has been there for far long. And in many ways, it comes back to systemic challenges within our healthcare system around staffing, around culture, around really creating that sense of belonging and also giving our clinicians a voice in the process. So, at the end of the day, it actually all comes down to experience, which is so interesting, obviously for us to be talking about that. It all comes down to experience and whether we create the experience for our clinicians, but also entire workforce that allows them to operate at the top of their license and allows them to contribute in a way that they feel like they need to. And frankly, my concern with this report is to Shawn's exact point, patients' lives are impacted.
And I guess I look at these numbers, and my first big question is, well, are these folks leaving to go to another career altogether, or are they just jumping ship between hospitals? Because the one or two administrators in the hospital world that we've talked to, which is not many, that what they say is that they'll have someone leave because they get grumpy about something, even though they're trying to do their best for them. They'll go where the grass is greener because someone's having a hiring fair and they're going to pay 15 cents more an hour. And then they realize that it's not greener over there. And they've had people who went and worked 2 or 3 other places and then end up back with them. But then they only kept them for 2 or 3 months and then they jumped ship again. That there's this carousel of different groups trying to lure people away with pennies on the hour. Do you have any data that explains those differences, or are people just really like, I'm done, I need to go do something else?
So there's definitely it's kind of a nuanced element. So without question, there's definitely people, clinicians who will do exactly as you subscribed, and I'll address that. But there's also individuals who will literally say, you know what, I'm going to go do virtual clinical work. I'm going to work for a health insurance company from home. My own mother did this, later in her career, where for her it just became easier for her schedule to work from home for Aetna, for CVS Health. Many people do that because they find that it just becomes a better cultural experience for them. For people who generally, let me be honest with you, when they jump ship for increase of pay, it's not really the increase in pay. It is truly the environment that they're working in. So for a leader to say, "Oh, they're just going because they're going to see if the grass is greener," no, it's not that. It is entirely on, is the cultural environment of that organization the right fit for me? So if you would dissect this report and you would do it by generations, what you would see is that our younger clinicians are leaving sooner. And it all comes down to, are they having a good experience? And I've had this discussion with some of the leading CEOs at the largest systems, and some of them agree, some of them disagree. And I always say to them, well, if you go close to where these challenges are, you'll hear exactly what the reasons are. You can't sit at the ivory tower and assume that these are the issues. The issues are clearly on culture.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael, because and you'll laugh, Geoffrey, when I bring this point up, because I think you've tried to be in contact with this gentleman. But I started reading yesterday a book called The Physician Underdog. And I had breakfast with this doctor, Dr. Nevin Gile, who was an anesthesiologist. And when you read his book, if you haven't read it, you need to get out and go get a copy of this, because what he said to me yesterday as we were sitting at breakfast, he said, Shawn, I studied and went years to school to not be an underdog. But yet, when I was in a hospital system and as an anesthesiologist, I had no control over my schedule. I had no control over my patients. I was told what to do, and I felt like an underdog. And that yesterday, when he said that to me, knowing we were coming into this conversation, I was like, oh my gosh, like that clicked and we've all heard the same. People don't leave companies, people leave leaders, right? So go ahead, Michael. I know you had more that you were going to say there.
Well, so my background is in training and facilitation, right? And so my limited experience in the turnover, and I don't really have any in the healthcare industry on that piece of the training and the turnover, but my experience is that often in the ecosystem approach, the individual plays a role as well as the culture, right? So it's maybe a little bit too easy for me to say, well, it's a cultural issue. Well, as long as we're saying that part of that culture is not training the individuals to interact with that culture, right? So if we've got a grumpy person who went into healthcare for the wrong reasons, but it's a job and now they're stuck because of their debt, they're jumping ship because they're not happy with their environment. Wherever they go, they're going to cause trouble in their environment and they're not going to be happy. So, what is the role of getting the system of the culture fixed, as well as doing whatever is needed in terms of training is such a throwaway word, but coaching or development, workforce development, to help those folks. Okay, this is a stressful job. Here are ways you can minimize that stress, right? You have trouble working under high stress situations with people. Here are some ways that you can work better with people, right? And I do know my limited experience in the healthcare teaching is that there's not time blocked for the training side, right? That, you get 30 minutes to go train. Well, and you're training online on a computer and you're checking the box. That's not how it works. So I'm sorry, I'm talking a whole bunch, but what is that role of making sure that the individuals can function in that ecosystem?
And before you answer that, Geoffrey, because I think this is great, because we have a listener, Christina says that as a clinician, culture is more valuable than a higher salary. So, Geoffrey, tell us, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Christina, and obviously applaud her and know Christina and the work that she does. So let me just say that, Michael, to your point, training, organizational development, coaching, mentorship are incredibly important. I will tell you that mentorship alone in healthcare, if we could bring mentorship into every facet of our healthcare system, we would see significant improvement in culture. It's why you're seeing, there's a movement right now across the country around nurse residency programs, which actually have been in place for a very long time. But some of your larger systems are now realizing they need to do more with nurse residencies. And at the core, the idea here is that we actually haven't trained our leaders, our new leaders, our existing leaders to know how it is to coach and mentor. So take nursing. Nurses are phenomenal at all that they do. But if you ask a nurse, oftentimes, I just did this in a grad class that I teach last night. I said, do you consider yourself a leader? Half the class answered yes. Half the class answered no. And I said, wait a second, you are all leaders, every single one of you. But when we put them into leadership in healthcare, we don't help them understand all the elements of leadership. And oftentimes we have leaders who put them in the leadership who also really don't know how to lead. And so we've got to ensure that we embed these types of aspects into every facet of the organization. And the first thing I want to say is everyone is a leader.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Well, I want to get a question answered here because I think this goes back to this, and this is from Cody that says, do you think that the model of health systems employing clinicians will evolve to a normalized travel or contract program?
Good question, Cody.
Yeah, so Cody raises a really interesting point, which obviously, as we know, during COVID, we've seen, more travel clinicians than ever in our history. Now, we've had that for a long time too, but COVID was a time where we saw that. Now, we also saw healthcare systems cut those contracts pretty quickly too after COVID, despite having still staffing issues and staffing concerns. So I think you're going to still see aspects of it. Here's the thing, though. When you and I know the nurse travel organizations are going to challenge me on this, and I'm happy to have those conversations. But I will tell you, clinically, when you look at the impact, particularly of a local nurse and a local clinician on the community that they live and serve, it is usually greater because they have a greater sense of belonging to that community. That's not to say across the board. If you're a travel nurse, I'm not saying that you're not good. I'm just saying that if you have a connection to that community, it's a bond. And for those of us that have experienced healthcare, we know what that's like when we're being seen by somebody who also lives in our community. It's just that bond.
I love that. And I love this quote too. And this probably leans more towards my side of disruption, but it says, bad leaders are the culprits, and organizations need to be more willing to part ways with those bad leaders. And I've worked in a couple of those corporations where it's like trying to get someone released is virtually impossible. One more thing that came out of that study that I read, and I think this would be really good for us to dive into here, and we're already getting close to time, is, in this study, Clinician of the Future, patient empowerment and the shift to a hybrid or a blended working environment are key drivers of change. So that's what this full study shows. They give a couple key drivers that the shift to hybrid or blended working environments are key drivers to change and patient empowerment. And for those of you that don't know much about the healthcare industry or listening in, also, if you're in value-based care, right? Next year, 56% of your reimbursements will be based on patient experience. So, what is your advice to the industry to help make this shift? Because I don't think people realize if you do value-based care, 56% now, more than half of your reimbursement and your income is going to be tied to patient experience and patient empowerment.
Yeah. So there's a couple things we have to do there. To the earlier part of it. So obviously we know for clinical professionals, it's hard to get to a hybrid, type of situation, but we can make some systemic changes there. Like other industries, we can have timeouts or debriefings. We don't do that enough in healthcare. We assume, if you're working a 12-hour shift, and let's say you work in a trauma center, you work in an ICU, you work in the emergency room, you're in high stressed areas, nonstop action, and yet you don't even get a break half of the time. That's not acceptable. We've got to create a culture where we value our clinical professionals and give them a chance to take a break and give them a chance to debrief with one another on what they faced. And we've got to bring mental health into that conversation, because it shouldn't take the tragic death of a healthcare professional for us to pass a federal law to acknowledge that. It should be embedded into every facet of the organization. The second thing, though, to your point, Shawn, is we've got to think really diligently here, to your point about value-based care, that, right now, I still think, patient experience is considered a buzzword in healthcare. We aren't really seeing true embedding of that strategy into every facet and fabric of the organization. And at the core, it's about human-centeredness. So now we're hearing about treat the whole person. Well, if you treat the whole person, and we're going to make a healthcare system around treating the whole person, let's also treat all of the staff. Let's help them so that they can help our patients.
So Michael loves when I do this. Not really. He hates when I pull him out. But you get the pom pom. Like, yes, like this is what frustrates the hell out of me. And I've been in healthcare now, God, 12 years. We've done work in there. And listen, and I love this. And I was actually just going to say this, but one of our listeners just put this in there that said, if airlines had some safety stats as healthcare, we would never fly. And yes, cannot disconnect mental health from physical health. They are so intertwined, right? Like, but yet I have been on a flight, and you probably experienced this, where the flight crew has timed out,
Mm-hmm.
right? After 12 hours, timed out. Can't do it. Can't fly. Can't leave the ground, right? But yet we have clinicians that we will make work 24 hours because we're short staffed. And listen, when I went through my surgery to have the tumor removed from me, I definitely did not want a tired clinician.
Yeah.
So when they say to me, you want the 6 o'clock in the morning surgery time? Yes. Right? Because I want to be the first one. I want to make sure but yet it is such a systemic thing that I don't understand. I don't understand 12-hour shifts in healthcare.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
out of every industry, we shouldn't have nurses and doctors and surgeons working that many hours. And that's just their shift, not all the other rotational stuff they do. So, but yeah, like, again, you got my pom pom for that one, Geoffrey. Like, it's we're there.
Well, let me give you a really short example that I think speaks to this. So there's a healthcare system that I was talking to a colleague who was talking to them recently, and they were trying to figure out how to get more nurses into their workforce. And this colleague of mine said to them, "Well, have you ever thought of reducing the shift hours and actually consider how you could actually have them work less but still give them benefits?" And the healthcare system, "Oh, our policies say you have to work at least 24 hours until we give you benefits." And the person said to them, "And there's exactly why you don't have nurses." Because you're not going to change a policy to get the workforce. So we've got to be, this is 2022. Come on now, be willing to change things for the right team members because our patients are going to benefit.
Yeah, and again, we're getting all kinds of quotes in, and this is true. I've seen it. I know you've seen it, Geoffrey. That more complications and error occur at the end of shifts rather than the beginning. Yeah. And now we live in a world that is so Sue happy, right? So it's no wonder that 47% want to leave the industry, right? Like, it's and Cody gives this one, and I love how he said this. He goes, if you remove the travel part of contracted clinicians, you get the benefits of local clinicians with the protection of an org focused on the clinician experience. I'm bullish on this concept, but I will be glad to be wrong. Right. And I do think there is something to it. And I have like a sister to me who's a travel nurse. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know we need to figure it out soon.
Yep.
Or it's going to be scary what happens.
Well, I mean, Cody's definitely has a point, because to the very concept of travel nursing, many travel nurses have left their existing facilities because their culture is not good, because they didn't feel like they could be engaged in the way that they need to be engaged. So then they travel and they have the different experiences. There are shorter times. So at the core, we've got to fix the culture, and we'll actually create a better system for everybody.
Yep. And another quote that said that, why are leaders stuck to policies and paradigms that employees pretty clearly hate? Michael, what's your thought on that one?
Yeah. To me, it is such a complicated issue. For me, it's the same as public education, right? And that until it is unpacked and unclogged and untangled, we're just going to still see stuff. And I get tired of fixing those symptoms of a signing bonus, $150, or even worse, incentives for, if you stay for 6 weeks, you get a gift card to Chili's, all those things that are just little band-aids that are well meant, well intended, and someone who doesn't have control trying to fix things. But until there's actually a some way to think creatively about pausing the system, which you can't because hospitals can't press pause, but you can set up a skunk works, or you can set up a separate something, or go one department at a time, and fix the problems. It is possible. It just takes creative leadership. And back to where we started, if you're not willing to do it, you are by default saying that people don't matter. So screw you.
Yeah. And Michael usually doesn't get that bold. So I love that. Right? Because it really is. It's really about the human experience, as you said, Geoffrey. And we at Mophie, we preach. We're a human-obsessed, maverick-minded organization. And we're unapologetic about that. In my years, people know I love Disney. I worked for Disney. But unapologetically, Disney says we will take care of our cast members. We may pay them less. And the truth is, people say to me, why did you leave there? Well, because they paid 25% under industry average. And at that time, for my family, we were going to become a one-income family. So I had to make that choice to leave there. But the benefits and the culture outweighed that. If I could have stayed there, and probably when I retire from doing this, I'll go back there, right? Like it's a culture that's out there that I just have to believe is there.
Yep.
Yeah. So any last closing remarks for our listeners, Geoffrey, before we wrap up the show today?
The last thing I just want to highlight is the other aspect you're seeing within this very topic is sort of the generational shifts occurring in healthcare. And we have more multiple generations than ever before actually in healthcare. But I've told CEOs and continue to tell them, if you celebrate the aspects that are different between the generations rather than call out, why you don't like this about a specific generation, you can create a more human-centered experience and a solution to some of these systemic issues. You got to lift them up for who they are, and we could really figure out some systemic solutions.
Yep.
Yeah, that gets the final one, Michael. That gets the pom-pom there. Well, Geoffrey, thank you so much. And we could keep going on talking about this. And we've had so many comments. Can't even keep up with all the comments today. What's the best place? I'm assuming LinkedIn for people to reach out to you as well. And let's keep this conversation going. And if you'll hang out for just a little bit, Michael and I will close up the show, and then we'll come back and say bye to you. So thanks again, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Michael, any big plans for the weekend?
Not one.
That's a great weekend. So enjoy it. It's supposed to be an okay weekend. I heard we got some rain coming up in our areas where both of us live. So, but yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for this great conversation. And we will be looking forward to the next Experience Friday Live. So have a great weekend, Michael, and to everybody else. And we will see you soon.
Peace out.